From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to this special edition of U.S. Farm Report this post-Thanksgiving weekend. I hope everyone enjoyed their holiday. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store. As the protein sector grows, demand is keeping up, but are we at a tipping point on prices? Our roundtables focus on the new year.
There's a lot of good opportunities out here, but we have to have a plan moving forward.
And we're taking a break from the news to reflect on a challenging year.
Talk to the farmers, they say this was the crop of a decade for them. That's really the crop that folks are going to make a profit on this year, right up until this happened.
Yet it's stories of triumph in the heartland we're showcasing this week for our annual Harvest of Thanks.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Now for the market-related news. As the livestock sector of agriculture continues to expand, two recent reports showing there are no signs of a slowdown for both beef and dairy. According to USDA, the total number of cattle on feed for slaughter reached 11.3 million head. That's as of November 1st. That's 6% above last year. Placements in feedlots, those jumped 10%, now at 2.39 million head. And marketings rose 6% compared to the same time last year at 1.80 million head. Scott Dreyer of Blue Reef Agri-Marketing says as long as the markets can keep up with the placement numbers, the balancing act between supply and demand should continue.
As we look out from now through the end of April, I think we can maintain the balance. Right now, we've got to get through some holiday demand. It's been good. Hopefully, we can clean off some shelves at the retailers as we work through Thanksgiving and Christmas. These holidays will be very important. If we can have good retail demand, continue on this as we work into the first of the year, I think we're going to be fine.
Dreyer says at some point supply will outpace demand, but he doesn't think the market is there yet. Well, according to the Ag Department's monthly milk production report, dairy cows in the top 23 states pumped out 16.7 billion pounds. That's an increase of 1.5% from a year ago. Now, per cow production is up 13 pounds from October 2016. California is the clear leader in milk production, but it did decline 1.5%. Wisconsin is up by about 2%. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association says during the first 9 months of 2017, the U.S. experienced 15 separate billion-dollar weather disasters. That ties 2011 for the most ever during the first 9 months. But in the latest edition of the quarterly report, The Feed, Farmer Mac says it doesn't take as large of a weather event to create a billion-dollar disaster today. Farmer Mac economists say in 2004, a storm would need to damage over 2 million acres to generate a $1 billion loss. In 2005, that had dropped to 1.5 million acres. And by 2012, it took less than 1 million damaged acres to equate to a $1 billion loss.
We're seeing more billion-dollar weather events than we've ever seen just because the cost of production is higher and farming is just more efficient. So an acre today produces way more revenue than it did 20 years ago because prices changed and yield has changed. And that means if you destroy that acre of production, that's going to cost more money. So you're seeing more and more devastating hailstorms, tornadoes, those types of things in the Midwest, where 30 years ago that really wasn't the case.
Agriculture's national forecast is brought to you by Ilevo Seed Treatment from Bayer.
All right, those are the headlines. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us now with weather. Mike, 2017 has seen its fair share of weather events, and I know you have a glimpse of your 90-day this weekend. So does that continue into 2018?
Thanks, Tyne. Well, basically, I think this pattern that we've been in over the last 3 or 4 weeks is going to continue off and on through most of the winter. And so that does look kind of colder in the east and warmer out west. We'll get to that in a second. Drought monitor, we continue to see very dry conditions in Arkansas and some of the surrounding areas all the way up towards St. Louis, and very dry western South Dakota into eastern Montana. Other than that, there's some dry pockets, but nothing really major across the country. Here's what's going on this week then. We do see the trough in the east. That's been kind of typical over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Like I pointed out, we see that one move away. Another one kind of move in by early in the day on Tuesday into the northern plains. That one dives through the Great Lakes and into the northeast by late on Wednesday. And as we round out the week toward early Friday, we're looking at one more trough kind of coming into the Great Lakes. That's been the pattern. Basically a ridge out west and a trough in the east, but it's kind of going back and forth in a lot of areas. So here's my forecast for this week. Temperatures should be below normal for the eastern sections. Near normal, kind of back and forth for the northern northern plains down through the Mississippi Valley, but then above normal most of the area west of there. Precipitation this week, this is incredible. You don't see this very often. Below normal across most of the lower 48. I'm going above normal in the Pacific Northwest. Here's my 90-day outlook going month by month. December temperatures below normal for the Great Lakes down to the Ohio River Valley, most of the northern half of the plains through much of Canada. Above normal the far southeast, southern Texas through the Four Corner region and most of California. I back off slightly on the cold for January, but keep it in the northern plains. Above normal through the southern tier of states. By February then below normal back into the Great Lakes and the northern plains. Above normal through the south and up the eastern seaboard. Precipitation over the next 90 days, mainly southern areas below normal. Great Lakes in the northeast and the Pacific Northwest probably above normal. Tyne?
Thanks, Mike. Well, now that Thanksgiving's behind us, what should you be watching as far as the markets go next week? We have Bill Biederman and Matt Bennett who join me next.
Shop Machinery Pete's Cyber Sale from November 27th to December 4th. Find special reduced price deals on all types of equipment from dealerships across the country. Make a purchase and receive $200 extra holiday cash. Visit www.machinerypete.com/sale.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I hope everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving. And now we're going to look at market action post-Thanksgiving as we head into Christmas. Bill Biederman and Matt Bennett join me this weekend. So, as we go into Christmas, I've heard some analysts say from year to year that, don't be asleep on these markets. You could potentially see some action and see some pops. Do you think that that's the case this year? And if so, is that something that farmers should be watching, Bill?
Well, I think you could see a pop. Just from a seasonal standpoint, the odds are real high that you'll see a little rally between Thanksgiving and, actually going into the first 2 weeks of December. The funds are massively short corn. There could be some short covering there. That alone could just be a factor for it. But, the grain's going to get put away. A lot of producers not really sure what their marketing supply to the market is going to be. So you could see a little bounce.
So, we know that a lot of viewers out there still have old crop, as well as this year's crop. When we look at the massive supplies and some of these on-farm storage and also elevators, specifically on-farm storage, what's your advice for producers right now? If we see some of these pops, is that something that you could take advantage of, and if so, how?
Well, certainly if you haven't locked in the carry in the market, that's something we need to be looking to do here. We do have full carry out to the July. It's a pretty good idea to go ahead and lock that in. We've already seen some indications from basis that, we could end up seeing more appreciation there. And a lot of that is, like I think Bill was referencing, the farmers' bin doors are locked at this point. Mm-hmm. And so if a farmer goes ahead and sells the carry in the market, anytime basis rallies, basically whenever that improves, they're going to put that money in their pocket. That's the same thing the grain elevator industry does. That's the main way they make money, is by selling the carry in the market, waiting on basis to get better.
Do you agree? Is the carry your friend at this point?
Oh, if you own cash inventory, it's everything, because you can pick up 15 cents on the carry and another 10 cents on basis. That's a 25-cent pop right there, and the market hasn't even moved. So yeah, you add another 20-cent rally in the futures, and you capture that, you'd be in great shape. So
what about these farmers that have corn stored at the elevator and are trying to figure out at this point, what do they do? What is your advice?
My advice is you're really in a position where you should sell it and then re-own it with options. But here's the problem. If you buy an option and at the money call, you're going to pay like 15 cents for it. So now you're paying for that premium in the market plus another 15 cents. So the way to really handle this is what we provide structures where you buy a call, you spend 15 cents for that, and then you go down and you sell a put for maybe 10 cents. Now that option is down to a nickel, maybe even 2 cents. But here's the neat thing. If the market goes up, you're long from right where the market is. If the market goes down to come down to the previous month's price, like carry markets do, you're not in the market until it gets down that 20 cents. Then you're owning it. So, it allows you to keep owning at the previous month's price level, which eliminates the carry cost.
That seems like a lot of work. But Bill's saying it's worth it. And Matt, do you think that is a good strategy?
You know, the thing that I see about a producer, if they put the corn in the elevator, they keep it in the elevator, to get out to spring, summer time frame, it's going to cost 35 to 40 cents. It's costing more than what the carry is offering them. And so absolutely, I would agree with what Bill's saying. I think a lot of these strategies are pretty cheap. I don't want to get too carried away with spending a whole lot of money on them, so I like a strategy similar to that. Some guys have been looking at call spreads. I'd probably lean a little closer to what Bill's talking about, because I think it makes really good sense whenever you look at, hey, we've got a carry in the market, and if we can take advantage of that short put, absolutely, it's a good idea to cheapen up the cost of that call.
But you know, we've seen these stagnant prices this year in 2017. As we look at 2018, Bill, do you think that continues? Do you think we'll see another year just like we saw this year?
I think that the complacency of the traders has increased over the last 2 years, thinking that, man, these producers can't do anything wrong. They're going to have record crops. That could cause a complacency into spring, but reality is, Tyne, we've got huge demand for all these things that we produce, and it's not going to take not even just a little spark, and it's going to attract big, big money. I'm talking institutional money. And the end user. The end users, they're looking at this thing. I mean, we work with a couple end users that are just licking their chops. For the first time I've ever seen in years, they're trying to get on beyond 6 months ownership on it. So this is, everybody knows it's cheap. You know, unfortunately, the producer is kind of in the quagmire of, I need cash and I don't have space.
But is that demand enough? That's what we're going to ask Matt Bennett when we come back on U.S. Farm Report, so don't go anywhere.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
Welcome back. Matt Bennett and Bill Biederman join me again this weekend. All right, when we look at this livestock demand, I mean, we know corn's cheap, and we heard from Bill, there's some livestock producers out there, some feed users that are taking advantage of that. With this growing herd, do you think that's enough demand to change this picture any?
I think the demand is quite strong, but again, I want to look at this from a profit margin standpoint. I think there's money on the table for most cattle producers. I certainly don't want to ignore that. I think that it's a good idea to go ahead and lock some of this in. I certainly don't want to let the whole thing ride. I know whenever we rallied up to the high 120s and even 130 on February fats, we were telling guys, we really need to be looking close at this. What do you have to lose by locking in the kind of profit margins we can lock in? And I still feel like even at 123, 124, guys have some money on the table if they're honest about it.
When we look at these cattle prices, you know, we've been impressed when you look at the growing supplies, yet we have prices where we do today. And really, you know, what are the fund positions in cattle? And is that an example of something that could happen in corn when you look at that interest?
Yeah, there used to be a really neat cycle that we used to follow where they would buy fuel and metals and then livestock and then grains. And it would repeat itself like that. We don't really see that as much anymore. Now it's food and fuel. That's where they either put on an inflation hedge or they get out of an inflation hedge. And they've come in and they've bought a ton of fuel. Crude oil's doubled its price. Livestock, they bought the meats. So grains are the cheapest thing left, and I do believe they'll come in here and buy that. I mean, we got a big supply. We could trade, you know, soybeans especially. They've rallied the most, so they have a lot of downside potential. But that break, I think, is going to be bought as these people move some of their assets into the cheaper commodities.
When we look at cattle specifically, this latest cattle on feed report, I mean, when you look at those numbers and this herd continues to grow, do you think we're at a tipping point? Are we at a tipping point where supply is going to outpace the demand that we're seeing?
Well, we've been thinking that for quite some time. And so at this point, we've got to look towards demand. Demand has been strong. I think demand's going to remain strong. We've proven that we like to eat beef. I think we're going to continue. 110% of last year is a pretty robust number. And that's part of the reason why I want to be a little bit cautious on cattle prices. But absolutely, I think demand's going to remain strong. I just don't want, as a cattle producer, to always be betting on the come here. I want to be able to lock in profits when they're available and not get too friendly.
When we look at these commodity prices overall, you look at the story that's kind of unfolded in 2017, more of the same. When we go into 2018, does this continue? And if it does, I've heard some economists say, Bill, that it's starting to feel like the 1980s. I mean, we've seen several years of these depressed prices. Do you agree?
Well, I agree with the idea that we're at record carryovers, and not only just here, but, well, not here in soybeans we're close, but around, the world carryovers are at record levels. But I think the main difference is farm policy, and I think farm policy is much more favorable to the free market system than it used to be. I mean, it was basically a supply-driven, managed market by the government, and now it's up to demand. And you look at, we got cheap enough now where we've got strong demand. I mean, you're talking about the profit margins in livestock. Well, it's true in Brazil, it's true in China. These people are going to be buying corn, DDGs. I mean, the demand is big. We have to keep producing a record supply or we won't stay in this dead trading range.
I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, as we head into 2018, is it more of the same, or do we have maybe a supply story out there somewhere where a little hiccup could really impact our prices?
Well, I think a hiccup could definitely impact prices, but I don't think that you're going to convince the market that Illinois is going to ever have a crop failure again after the kind of year we had this past year. The thing is, definitely our genetics are phenomenal, but we are going to have some sort of a crop failure at some point again. It will happen. We saw it in 2012, and we had pretty darn good genetics in 2012.
But do we have to wait another 30 years to see it again?
I'm not sure that we're going to have to wait another 30 years, but I do think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that if we have decent weather, it's going to be hard to rally the market significantly. So if we do have money on the table due to this huge carry in the market, I don't want to ignore that.
All right. Well, thank you both. We need to take a quick break, but then when we come back, we'll get their closing thoughts. So don't go anywhere.
Receive a free trial of the Daily Grain Plan newsletter from Roach Ag Marketing. Text Roach to 31313. Start your subscription today by texting Roach to 31313. U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by the Liberty Link system, the simply better solution for a stronger yield and superior weed control from Bayer.
All right, welcome back. Time now for closing thoughts. Bill?
Soybean world stocks are pushing 98 million tons. That's huge, and South America's got another crop coming on. The beans are getting close to $10. I think people are nuts if they don't sell that. You can wait for a big break and then replace it, but I would just get it sold. In the corn and then the wheat, it's a better deal to anything you have to sell, maintain ownership. You can do it with options pretty cheap.
All right, Bill, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of things to be thankful here in 2017. Had a pretty darn good crop. The prices are still fairly good. With soybeans, I agree with Bill. But I want to take a hard look at what our 2018 prices look like as well. I don't want to leave too much riding. I think that there's a lot of good opportunities out here, but we have to have a plan moving forward.
All right. Thank you both for joining us this weekend. We appreciate it. Stay with us. John Phipps joins us from the farm next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new.
Welcome back. Well, this Thanksgiving weekend, we head to John's farm for his thoughts. John?
Well, we've finished harvest and tillage and spraying and even cleaned up and stored some of the machinery. So it's officially woodworking season. Right now I'm kind of reclaiming some usable lumber from the joists and studs from an old farmhouse. Not sure what I'm going to make because I won't know until after roughing the lumber how many board feet of what I've got and in what lengths they'll be. There are often unpleasant surprises hidden under the dirt and paint and weathering of salvaged lumber. One thing I have learned is to buy cheap saw blades for those first cuts. Even with a metal detector, you cannot count on 100% success in removing nails, and they always seem to be in the cut line. There's a lot of satisfaction in getting some hidden value from stuff that would otherwise be burned or buried. But I've found if I can scrape together enough material to make it even into an ordinary but practical piece of furniture or decoration, that is the most rewarding. It's not just a usable end product like a table or a chest. It's an instant heirloom because it was made from salvage from Uncle Bill's house or some other beloved ancestor. This is trickier than it seems because Uncle Bill did not build his house from identical trees or species even, or even particularly good trees. So trying to come up with reasonably matched pieces for, say, a tabletop is a big part of the challenge. I'm as guilty as anyone of casually throwing away items that still work just to get some new feature or ease of operation on a replacement. So maybe finding a way to reuse century-plus old lumber offsets my questionable habit of tossing out printers and cameras and phones without a second thought. It eases my conscience a little, anyway.
Thanks, John. Well, you'll want to stick around as we have our annual Harvest of Thanks special coming up next. 2017 proved to be a challenging year, but after the flood and after the fire, there was triumph in the heartland. We have those stories next.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.
I'm John Loggeman with John Deere. Like most Americans, we were heartbroken by the impact of recent hurricanes and wildfires, but amazed at the way people stepped up to help each other. Nowhere is this more evident than in farm communities. That's why John Deere is proud to sponsor Harvest of Thanks. And that's why we donated $1 million to disaster relief last month. Working together, we can repair and rebuild. That's what we do. On behalf of John Deere and our dealers, I just want to say thank you.
Hello, I'm Clinton Griffiths.
And I'm Tyne Morgan. Thanks for joining us on this brisk fall day.
Ooh, it's a cool one today. Well, you know, harvest is not only a time to give thanks, it's also a time to reflect on another year of hard work. And 2017 was a year full of not only blessings, but struggles as well.
Yeah, from raging wildfires to unforgiving hurricanes, those in Mother Nature's path will forever remember such a challenging year.
But after the fire and after the storms, the heartland triumphed.
Farmers and ranchers prove that no matter the obstacles of Mother Nature, it's an industry full of so much grit and so much heart.
It was a historic year for wildfires. Just 3/4 of the way through 2017, USDA announced its wildfire fighting efforts topped $2 billion, making it the costliest wildfire year ever. The heartbreaking wildfire story launched in March as a historic wildfire burned 1.5 million acres in Texas, Kansas, and Oklahoma.
And the numbers are startling, with more than 10,000 head of cattle perished from the wildfires and more than 18,000 miles of fence lost due to ferocious flames. While healing is happening, the scars are still there, both on the land and on the lives who fought hard to save their property, livestock, and homes.
It's been roughly 10 months since these massive fires scorched the southern plains. The area is rebuilding, life is moving on, but the experiences of that disaster remain raw. Here's Betsy Jimin.
It was just a historic day. The fire danger was so high that day. You just tried to save the people, and then after the fire went through and we got some help, then we went back to see what was left. We had never lost a house to a grass fire until that day, and I think we lost 15. And this house we could not protect. We had to bypass it to go to town. Everything that we see here burned, and it pretty much killed all of our tree rows. Okay, this is some donated hay that came in about probably a month after the fire. This is just a stack yard. This is one of many that we have scattered around the county for anyone that needs it. Most people stayed, but we did have some that left. And here we are pulling up to the firehouse. This was our base through the whole fire. I just want our volunteers to get their day. I am extremely proud. We got guys from, our youngest is 18, our oldest is maybe in his 70s, and they never backed up. We have started rebuilding the herd. I've had some donated. I've purchased some cows through the auctions. That's the way I've done mine.
We just heard about the fire and everything, and we just volunteered to come out here and help these people.
The fencing is pretty challenging, but we're gaining right along on it.
We built a mile yesterday and a mile the day before. It's pretty good for just old country bumpkins from Tennessee.
We have hopes to have it all done by early spring or maybe even by the first of the year.
We're just proud to be here.
I was very proud of America, the way they come in and helped us out. But not only did they bring hay, they brought hope. And this fire was a large fire, and it was a really mean fire. It moved fast and didn't care what it burned, but I think that we should be thankful for being where we're at today. It's been a really good, bad experience.
When we come back, we'll meet a Texas man who risked his own life to help save livestock and buildings in the path of the fire, but in the end, he was the one who needed help. I'll share his story next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Kubota. Discover the power behind the M6 series at Kubota.com.
The wind is an ever-present companion among the hard landscapes of the northern panhandle of Texas. As gusts ripple softly across an endless carpet of grass, Cody Graves is still standing in the memories of March.
The wind was howling, and it just a black wall.
Cody, a working cowboy near Lipscomb, Texas, is also a volunteer firefighter.
Everybody woke up, the whole fire department called each other and said, keep your eyes out because this is not a good day. And the humidity was 0 and the wind was blowing 45, 50 miles an hour.
Good rains brought good grass last spring and plenty of fuel for the fury that would follow.
And I was sitting at fires, but it was a ways away from us for a little bit. The wind changed, and then that's when our fire department got called out. It was terrible. There was tornadoes in that fire.
Even visible from passenger planes above, the fire now racing across the prairie.
I said, there is no way we can do anything about this. We could have 100 trucks that couldn't stop this.
They fought anyway, doing all they could, saving houses, cutting fences, freeing livestock, all while nearly losing their own fire station in the process.
It's a master lock that was on that storage building outside. People that's been fighting fire longer than I have were scared and didn't know what to do.
The hours and the acres burned on.
That fire started Monday, and it was Tuesday morning about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we got called to another fire.
In the smoke and the tiredness, Cody's fire truck slipped off an embankment.
It kind of jarred me a little bit, and it was hurting pretty bad, and but we couldn't stop.
15 hours later, those trucks were parked, but Cody's next steps would be his hardest.
It was about a week after the fire. I couldn't walk very well, and it was just wasn't sleeping, and so I figured I'd just go get it checked out, and here we are.
His diagnosis: severe damage to his spine. A problem that's not new. As a young man, an accident left him in a similar situation. Doctors said he'd likely never walk again. Well, he proved them wrong. This time seems different. His back is in tangles. This cowboy's doing more sitting than roping. Walking is hard. Working and writing, impossible.
Trying to find peace, it's kind of hard when you can't go out and play with the kids a little bit. And the boys are taking it kind of rough.
He passes the time with his hands, reflecting on the fires still burning through his thoughts, knowing he's the lucky one.
Friends of mine got killed in McLean, and I knew the kid that got killed here outside of Lipscomb, and it was a tragic deal. When you hear of a fire taking lives, you wish you could have done more and helped more.
And yet, help has lifted his spirits.
It was very humbling, and grown men cried, and people that usually helped other people didn't know how to take the help, but it humbled them in a way. It makes you proud to live in this country after seeing all the people that come together.
A community helping to restore lives, supporting each other, rebuilding the future. Like the rains that soaked these blackened fields, that spirit helps new life spring forth, rooted and resilient. Just 5 months later, Texas was hit again.
This time with water. We have the story of perseverance and hope next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by QLF. For 40 years, QLF has been proud to support American farmers that feed the world.
Welcome back. Hurricane Harvey was relentless. More than 50 inches of rain fell near Houston. In total, 27 trillion gallons of water dumped on the land.
With a bumper cotton crop setting in the fields, as the catastrophe unfolded, it washed away hopes of a bountiful year, but it didn't drown out Ag's spirit of survival.
You got a street or two off of the main road, and it just looked like a war zone.
We've had, I guess storms and hurricanes, but nothing's ever been like this that I can remember.
This was no little storm. You stop and you look at it, it is definitely historic.
Those individuals that thought that they were out of harm's way ended up having to evacuate themselves out of their homes, get their families to safety, and then they had to deal with their livestock. That is the lifeblood of this community, is agriculture.
This is kind of I think the depth of what it got in the house, all the way up here to this log. I'm sure that one's wet some too.
Like I've always told young ones, if you make money, save it. The bad one's coming. The yields were above normal. What we picked, some was over 3 and some 2 3/4. And I've had yields at that level, but not over basically every acre that's grown here. That was the big difference.
Talk to the farmers, they say this was the crop of a decade for them. That's really the crop that folks are going to make a profit on this year, right up until this happened.
It's always good to make a good crop, and all the cotton in the county was really good, exceptional. It was going to be a personal record, I know. Now it's just going to be what it is.
I've got some fields that we didn't get to. They appear to be picked right now after this. I've got some modules totally destroyed in the field.
You hear the roar, you kind of walk outside and you look up and those trees aren't leaning one way or the other. They're literally swirling at the top, almost like what would be in a tornado. And if you've seen cattle, as I know you have, when they get into those kind of winds, they kind of turn and face it. Very, very resilient species and breed.
We have a lot of stranded cattle. A lot of these cattle have swam for miles, some of them, to find high ground, and they can't move any further. So we've got to get some feed and hay to them, to those areas. We have a tremendous group of dedicated volunteers that have come in from across Texas and some of them across the United States.
It's the Texas way. You're friendly, you help people, you do what you can for anybody, no matter if they're your friend, your neighbor, a stranger, or anything else.
The whole family's safe. We're all good. It's a mess, but we're gonna fix it.
Our thanks to Texas Farm Bureau for that piece. Well, Hurricane Harvey definitely left its mark with $200 million of damages just to crops and livestock in the state.
And yet Mother Nature wasn't done. Just 2 weeks later, another massive hurricane hit Florida. We head there next. It's an emotional holiday season for citrus growers in Southwest Florida. In September, Hurricane Irma wiped out months of farmers' efforts in a matter of hours.
A crushing scene in the small town of LaBelle. Rows of citrus trees bent over from hurricane-forced winds, branches snapped, and fruit still on the ground.
I had a beautiful crop. My buyers were all excited. Everybody's excited. The fruit was beautiful, clean, nice, and then the storm came.
Martin Mason started in the citrus business shortly after retiring. That was 2011. 6 years later, his first crop of 40 acres in ruins.
I hate to admit this, but during the storm, I got on my little gator and drove out, and I could see the trees laying over, and I knew what it was like. It was just devastating. So we've lost probably 3,000 to 4,000 boxes, I think. It's very saddening in the morning to come out and look at it.
Just down the road, a similar story.
About 9 o'clock when it did subside, I went out and certainly you could really tell. Even in the dark, right shortly after it, I could tell it wasn't going to be good the next morning. From probably a low of 60% on some of my Valencia late season oranges to probably 80% on some early season oranges that were more mature, bigger.
A devastating situation for lifetime farmer Wayne Simmons, who says they had finally turned a corner after a decade of battling citrus greening.
They thought we did have a better crop, that we would maybe start plateauing and maybe increasing. So very optimistic in the industry, but after this, it's really been tough.
And the tough times aren't over.
We had 90 to 95% of our expenses in this crop. And then to see all our income hit the ground from the storm. So we're basically going to have to carry these grows probably for at least another 18 months at the minimum, with no income to speak of. Unfortunately, the crop insurance is not geared to Florida, to citrus. It's more geared to the Midwest, corn, soybeans, and cotton, and those row crop varieties. So, you know, we're probably only going to get at no more than 25 cents on the dollar.
After all this, the huge financial loss, the stress, the recovery work, the resilience keeps them moving forward and into harvest.
I'm a farmer, I'm not going to run away from it.
Steadfast and grateful in their resolve.
I'm thankful for my family, for being a part of God's steward and what He's given me, and you know, it's easy to get emotional about it, but I've got a great number of things to be thankful for.
With so much heartache in the heartland, we have thoughts on perseverance.
John Phipps joins us next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Liberty Herbicide, the simply better solution for superior weed control and stronger yield.
One of my earliest and most cherished memories of my grandmother was standing beside her in her kitchen one winter afternoon as she made pies. A dear friend of hers had died unexpectedly, and she was making pies to take to the family. Her pies were legendary, and not just to me, her #1 fan. What struck this engineer to be most strongly was how she could do it seemingly automatically. No recipes or measuring or wasted motion. On this occasion, though, I looked up to see tears of grief slide down her flour-covered cheek as she worked. I was too young to fully understand her loss, of course. Her friend was just another old lady in the church, which I now realize meant someone in her 50s. Even at that age, it hurt to see my grandmother so sad. I asked her how she could work when she felt so bad. I recall her reply, "Johnny, it is when you hurt that working to help others is the best thing you can do. Besides, I've never had anybody say no to a pie." Hearts have been broken by fire and water this year. From Puerto Rico to Montana, from Houston to Santa Rosa, too many Americans have faced painful losses firsthand or, like my grandmother, through the bonds of friendship, neighborhood, or kin. Modern psychology has often suggested grief counseling and other talking cures to help victims adjust and move past despair. As useful as such efforts may be, many experts are adding something like pie making, action and movement to start the emotional recovery process. In a way, farmers who loaded up hay for hungry cattle and desperate farmers were making pies of their own. In the process, consolation was poured out on survivor and donor alike. There will be a time ahead to share and process those painful memories, and we should always be ready to listen and encourage. But I hope our instincts become shaped by the pattern of not just asking what we can do when disaster strikes, but spontaneously doing what we can do. Make a pie of some sort and then give it away.
Well said, John. You know, in a time of so much divisiveness and uncertainty, it's an honor to work in this industry and with people who care.
Yeah, they care for their neighbors, their families, their land, and their futures. We've stood witness to this time and time again. So this holiday season, as you give thanks for the blessings in your own lives, feel good knowing you stepped up, you reached out, and you gave to others in need.
There's no scorecard, there's no tally, no golden stickers, but we noticed, and we're proud to stand with you in trials and in triumphs. May your awards be evident in the blessings before you and as an industry that exemplifies both thanks and giving.
Well said. God bless and have a great Thanksgiving holiday with your families, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report has been brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest lasting heavy duty pickups.